Hi, I'm Mr. O'Brien, and this is a video from the English department. And we're going to be talking you through the ways that you can support your child through their GCSEs. So first of all, let's talk through the structure of the assessment. As with previous years, there are no controlled assessments as part of this GCSE course. Sets 1 to 4 will sit 4 examinations at the end of year 11, and set 5 will sit 2 examinations. So let me just explain how that's divided up. So all sets will sit these 2 papers, English language paper 1 and 2. And if your child is in set 5, that's Mr. Raybold set 5 or Mr. Bennett set 5, these are the only 2 exams that they will sit, the 2 language ones. The 2 language ones contain unseen extracts. That means the students will need to be answering questions on extracts that they're reading for the first time in the exams. So they need to have skills appertaining around analysis, observation, inference, and interpretation. And there's a writing section on both papers, which is marked quite heavily for spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So in other words, written accuracy is very important for the language papers. So for the literature papers then, these are what is known as closed book examinations. And that means our students will be examined on the text that they have studied with their teachers and that will be prepared for. However, they will not have access to those texts in the actual exams themselves. So that, of course, puts a real emphasis on the ability to memorize quotations and other aspects of the text that they've studied. Okay, so the 2 papers then, and what topics are where. Love and relationship poetry is section A for paper 1, and regardless of which group your child is in, although bear in mind this is just sets 1 to 4. So basically all sets 1 to 4 will take this section A that will answer the questions on the love and relationship poetry. Now it's when we get to section B or C where there's a bit of difference between the various sets. If you're in Mr. Karimji's set 1 class, then the second part of the paper that you will sit is the 19th century novel one. That's the question on Jekyll and Hyde in section B. However, all other sets 1 to 4 will sit section C, which is based on a play called An Inspector Calls, which those sets will be studying after October half term. For literature paper 2, it will be the same 2 sections that all students in the sets 1 to 4 to sit will be section A on Macbeth, which all classes are now studying, and the second section on unseen poetry, which, like the language papers, has poetry which will be seen for the first time in those exams. So it's a sort of reading test. So what does this mean for your child then? All of the students have to develop their memory and recall skills to learn quotations and poems, at least those sitting the literature do. Those sitting the language will need to remember the key terminology around the writer's craft when looking at unseen texts. So knowing the different terms for the different parts of speech that a writer uses for particular effect, knowing the key terms around different literary devices that are used to achieve the effects that the writer is intending. All classes will continually to improve their spelling, punctuation, and grammar accuracy and control, particularly for the language papers, as I said. And because of all the emphasis on reading unseen texts, they need to be able to read and extract information from an unseen text quickly at speed, because they are, of course, timed exams. They also need to be able to write analytically and to evaluate the choices a writer has made. So as well as understanding what they're reading, they need to have that appreciation for how subtler ideas are conveyed by a writer and think analytically, but also to respond in a critical way, particularly for the later stages of the language questions, where they'll need to be able to actually agree or disagree with the point of view put forward in response to the text. So evaluation skills are key as well. Same applies to the literature. Most of the literature involves writing a single question on a single text. So it'll be one essay on the text they've studied. And again, they need to have a kind of a critical perspective there and try to develop that throughout their answer. So some practical tips then on how to support the development of these skills at home. The most obvious one is to get your child working on thinking about language and structure. Because these are two areas of the writer's craft that your child will be addressing in all of their papers, whether it be language or literature, it's something that can be practiced very easily at home. So your child should be aware of using the technique of PEA, which is something we introduced from year 7 and develop right the way up to this year. And it's the framework that students are used to using to analyse a writer's craft, be it looking at some of their language, word choices, or structure, the kind of bigger movements and developments of the whole text. So encourage them to practice this skill on their reading book that they're reading in dear time or for pleasure or just for their pure development, or with things online, text online like newspaper websites and things, and other news sources, and any of the books that can be used at home that lend themselves to analysis. And really it can be fiction or non-fiction texts. So that's a really good starting point, right? For them to use what they know so well and use so often in class on something new at home, basically. What do they need to retain then for their four exam texts? So this is where we think about what needs to be memorized, with particular emphasis on the literature papers. So key quotations for the literature papers need to be revised and remembered. And if you look at your child's copy of their class readers, they should be well annotated, with quotes being highlighted and notes taken next to them about why the quotes are key, which themes they relate to, which characters they support readings of. And that's a really good starting point for getting together those key quotes, creating mind maps for characters, for themes. As I said, the other thing they need to be aware of is contextual influences as well. And again, with the work that we do around the set texts, most teachers tend to do an introduction to the context, particularly for historical texts like Macbeth and the 19th century. We look at the key historical influences there, and anything to do with the writer's personal life and personal ethos and philosophies, which may have influenced the ideas and the way the text is written. But we tend to drip feed these things in as we actually read as well, and flag up with the students key moments in the text where we can clearly see a contextual influence. So again, this is something to be encouraging them to revise when they go through their notes and they go through their copies of the set texts. How well do they know those key contextual influences? That's another area that will be marked. What to avoid? Approaches in the past that we've found to be very unsuccessful are being tempted to just rely on reading over class notes without actually really doing anything with them, just skimming over them, getting a sense of them, which can often convince yourself that you're revising and that it's going in. But until you actually do something with that information in a creative capacity or something more productive, then your child won't really know whether it's going in or not. So encouraging them to test themselves, to jot down what they can remember from memory before going back to their notes, or perhaps even getting involved in the quickfire testing with them. If you had 10 minutes with them to look at some of their key highlighted quotes and test them on them, encouraging them to make things like flashcards as well, so that they're actually putting their knowledge to some creative use and applying it, as opposed to just, as I said, glancing over and reading, which is when things are less likely to stick. There are also lots of really, really helpful revision units online, which we which we would endorse, and I'll share some of those a little bit further into the presentation. So what is particularly valuable for your child's success this year across the board? We're really encouraging all students to get the most out of every lesson, and we'd appreciate that encouragement from you as well. It is obviously a critical year, you know, pandemic or no pandemic. It's amazing the difference that just a few weeks can make in terms of, you know, driving that success, right? Absolute focus in lessons is key. Getting as much out of every lesson as possible is key. We need to see students putting all of their effort into homework assignments. You know, we're still teaching new content. We've still got new set text to get through, and most of the homework that is set now are consolidation exercises where students have the ability to, you know, consolidate and bring together what they've been learning, and it's helpful for them to do that in terms of developing their progress, and it's helpful for us to do that because we can really get a true picture of what their level of understanding is, and it really helps us to home in on, you know, what they still need a bit of work on and what they need extra support with. But you know, if that effort is disingenuous and they haven't tried as well as perhaps they could do, then it doesn't necessarily produce a true reflection of what they're able to do, and it makes it harder for us to help them. So effort with homework and with classwork is key. In the event that your child needs to be absent, it's equally key that they sustain their work output, even if they need to be absent from school. And I'll just go into that a bit more on the next slide. But just to round this section off with a genuine message that it's not too late. You know, regardless of the circumstances that some of us might be coming from. Last year, you know, regardless of previous academic reports and, you know, report indicators that can sometimes seem more doom and gloom, it's never too late. We always see examples of those who, you know, pull their socks up in year 11 and just go for it, ended up with really remarkable success stories. So, you know, we need your child to believe in themselves as much as you and I believe in them, essentially. What if my child has to be absent from school then? So the place to go is the L Drive. There will be more information on this from the pastoral team, from the senior leadership team, sorry. And in terms of time management, they should be spending 4 hours a week on their English. So this term we're working on Macbeth, and there are Macbeth lessons and tutorial videos which we've asked our students to follow, and the link to which can be found in the L Drive, as I said. The other message to make clear is in regards to what to do with their completed work. So we're asking, where possible, that students email their work to us on the day that they complete it. So the presumption is that will be going on 4 times a week, and that means they should be emailing their English teachers with the work they've done, the notes they've taken, 4 times a week, right? So other tips are going to be sent out via email, and we've used that to provide some useful internet sources to aid with revision. But the only other final message before I share that is just encourage your child to, you know, not be afraid to ask should they have any questions or concerns or needs that they feel you know, could be met. You know, we're all here to listen, and we'll do everything we can essentially to support your child through a difficult year. So this is a document we're going to send out with some practical tips on to develop this theme of what to do from home. So key messages for reading then. Reading a variety of fiction and non-fiction remains the message. You know, we really drive this message from year 7 all the way up. You know, that message doesn't stop in year 11. The difference it makes is absolutely profound. You know, even when your child is, you know, very, very busy with revision and with homework, finding that time to read new texts, to expose yourself to to new writing is key in building them up for being ready to essentially sit examinations on largely unseen texts, and of course improving that capacity to read and that capacity to infer deeper at meaning. The other effects as well are that are a bit of a given. I won't go too much into now, but the proof of the research around reading is that it just pays absolute dividends. And because it's not something that appears to have an immediate effect, sometimes our students can overlook that a little bit, but we'd really appreciate your encouragement there for them to always make sure they're reading something new and they're devoting a certain amount of time to new reading in the week. Read the news, and it'd be really helpful for you to discuss it with them so that they're engaging critically with current affairs. That's particularly key for language paper 2, where the texts are more non-fiction and they're having to write about kind of real world issues and express their view on them persuasively. Working through the AQA English language GCSE units on the free website Seneca as well is something we fully encourage. I'm going to take you to this link actually a bit further in, show you how it works. In terms of the writing then, so as I said, 50% of the marks for the English language exams will be made up from your child's written ability. And the things that they can be doing there are practicing writing speeches and sort of opinion articles which present an opinion on current affairs issues, which, as I said, links into the whole reading the news area. Using pictures as starting points to produce short stories and descriptions, or just generally writing descriptions of people, places and experience will help to support them and give them the practice they need for the paper 1 creative writing task. For the set text and anthology then, if you're doing if your child is doing the literature exam, so sets 1 to 4, the most obvious thing to do to start with is to make sure that the texts are reread, particularly those that were studied in year 10 even, and will be a little bit fainter in the memory now. Really key that they get them reread before they begin re-revising them, so that should be happening soon essentially. Same with the poetry. It's good practice to list the main plot events in the texts they have studied as a good way of drilling their memory. And then afterwards, using some of the plot guides and things that they've been given in class or that are provided in their set text for them to see which key plot events they've missed to help to fill those gaps. Memorizing key quotations for characters and themes studied. And obviously, to begin with, making sure that your child spends a bit of time, creating useful revision sources that will aid that. So creating mind maps with character quotes around each character's name, same for themes, so that they've got something to work with and then they can test their memory on them. And memorizing key contextual facts as well. So some websites recommended then. Quizlet is excellent for a flashcard kind of quick-fire memory sort of format, and the Quizlet is quite popular to use to test our students' ability on memorizing quotes for the text, and there's some links here to those, but encourage your child to explore this a little bit more if their English teacher hasn't shared it with them already. There are lots of other uses for it as well. Your child can actually create their own virtual flashcards on there with the sort of questions on one side and the answers on the back, right? So it's a really, really useful format. And there are other sort of other units of learning around the set text. So for Macbeth, for instance, you haven't just got the key quote memory task. You've got other things as well around learning and revising themes that are very well suited to that quick fire style, where it's getting through sort of 20 questions in 2 minutes. It's really, really good quick fire. Seneca was the other one I mentioned, which I'll just share now. But before I do, I'll just quickly mention this last link to the Oak Academy website, academic website. If your child is learns particularly well through video tutorials, this has got sort of step-by-step, part-by-part video tutorials on all of the set text that we've studied. This takes you to the main sort of menu, and you can select which text it is your child wants to revise. So that's something that is very, very recommended. Now, in terms of Seneca achieves a bit of a perfect balance of, let's just switch it up and share it. So this is the link that you'll follow, for instance, to get to the Macbeth unit on Seneca. And I've put links to all the other set texts in that document I was just sharing with you. So this achieves a really nice blend of key kind of revision nuggets, but with new learning as well. It's a very, very sort of interactive process of helping your child revise the key concepts and the key bits of information, but also just building on their understanding bit as well. So you work your way through units, and each unit can be banked. The best thing that your child could do would be to sign up and start an account so that they can keep see the records of their scores they got in certain units, so that they can see where their weaknesses are. Now, you don't even necessarily need to sign up to use it. You can just click these links and start learning and have a go and see how you do. It's a good revision practice. But as I said, signing up and seeing what the scores are will allow your child to kind of go back to the units that they've got the lowest scores on, and really get a good kind of handle on what it is they're doing better on and what they need to devote more revision time to. So it's a very interactive process. It's a very revision, bite-sized style of revision, as you can see here, right? So we read through the information, and we're then questioned on what we've read, on what we understand. We put what we think are the correct answers in, we submit them, and we get our marks back, right? So it sort of walks you through, and it's very well built around revision needs, and around building the foundations of going from a basic understanding of a text to a very strong one. So that's another thing that we would really recommend your child to use. So that's a bit about it from the English department. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions about the presentation or about your child's English, or in any area of it or aspect of it, then don't hesitate to email your child's class teacher, or you can get in touch with me. As I said, I'm Mr. O'Brien. So it just leaves me to say thanks for listening and all the best.